I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the...
A big hello to all our wonderful listeners. Welcome back to another beautiful talk on Modern Thug. So, guys, what are we talking about today?
Well, in today's discussion, we'll be talking about the wide variety of themes discussed in the quite popular book called The Hate U Give. Huge credits to the author, Angie Thomas.
I definitely agree. This book had such a powerful message, including many relevant topics in today's world.
That's right. The common themes in this book, like racism and hatred, are worth a talk, and you'll be amazed by the answers for the few questions we've come up with to the related topics.
Well, what are we waiting for? Laksa, the book The Hate U Give discusses a lot about family commitment. What do you think defines a family?
Well, a family is the foundation of life and the source of unconditional love. The important characteristics of a family incorporate the support of members in difficult situations, people who protect you, and the care and nurture of one another. In this book, The Hate U Give, Star has faced many problems regarding Khalil's death and also continued having an identity crisis which mentally put her down. Through all her problems, Star has always had the support through family, which mostly consists of Lisa, Maverick, Seven, Sukani, and Uncle Carlos. We firstly, around chapter 11, I believe, see how the character Maverick expresses, "You and your brothers are something to live for and something to die for, and I'll do whatever I gotta do to protect you." This quote is honestly an incredible representation of what defines a family, because Maverick is always willing to risk his life to ensure the safety of his loved ones. Whether it's the cruelty of King or the police officers who contradict the idea of Star pointing out the wrongdoings of police brutality that led to Khalil's death, Maverick is always down to take a bullet for his family. Maverick firmly dislikes the idea of moving out from Garden Heights, but the devotion to keep his family protected allowed him to agree to moving. This perspective changed his mind about moving, while we also learned that in order to protect our families, we should be willing to change our decisions. But throughout the book, despite having an emotional rollercoaster ride, Star was able to confide in her parents, who always provided a shoulder to display their undying love and support. This quote around chapter 15, I think, states, "At an early age, I learned that people make mistakes, and you have to decide if their mistakes are bigger than your love for them." This quote emphasizes the importance of family as it showcases parental guidance. Lisa helps Star by giving parental advice, as well as sharing her personal experiences that will help Star figure out what to do with her friendship with Haley, as Star has constantly been hurt by her. As much as Lisa loathes Haley, she showcases her support by giving Star valuable advice, while also giving her the ability to choose whether it is worth having a racist friend who doesn't let her own freedom to act according to her likes and dislikes. From this quote, we can also infer that families argue with each other, as we saw the many times Maverick and Lisa have fought. We heard about how Maverick made a mistake by getting Aisha pregnant, but Lisa shows us that when you love someone unconditionally, their mistakes don't define them, but rather the love you have for them stands out stronger. Getting into arguments and still loving your family no matter the mistake they make really defines the unconditional love families have with each other. Well, to wrap this question up, families are the ones who will always be there for an individual in difficult situations, while also providing protection, care, and nurture to one another. Okay, so I have talked too much. So Neha, an important theme in this book is the cycle of hatred. How is the cycle of hatred created and perpetuated? How can it be stopped?
That's a wonderful question, Laksa. Due to political influence, racism, and stereotyping, the cycle of perpetuated hate continues in society. Angie Thomas's acclaimed novel, The Hate U Give, brilliantly depicts the systemic hate that African Americans endure. It is always perceived that black men are violent, threatening, and involve themselves in criminal activities. I remember reading this one quote on page 247. "That's all Khalil and I wanted, and you're making us out to be monsters." Although Khalil was the one who was murdered, the media expressed no form of remorse and sympathized with Brian Cruz, the police officer who shot him without any remorse. The response that Khalil's murder received expresses how black men are continuing to be portrayed as dangerous on the basis of racial and social stereotyping. This never-ending cycle of hatred is created from personal bias, racism, and prejudice. This can only be stopped when the oppressed voices are ready to speak out against the injustices happening to them. Star Carter, the protagonist, had feared the authorities for so long when it had come to defend Khalil's name against the speculations the media spread about him. During the protest in Garden Heights near the end of the book, Star musters up the courage and decides to speak up her mind. In chapter 24, I remember reading this quote and felt so powerful. "We weren't doing anything wrong. Not only did Officer Cruz assume we were up to no good, he assumed we were criminals. Well, Officer Cruz is the criminal." This quote is a clear depiction of the constant misjudgment that police officers have about African Americans. It also gives encouragement to these authorities and police officers to continue their intimidations while also using racial stereotypes to cover up their personal bias and hatred. Brian Cruz used Khalil's drug dealing case as a justification for his murder while also misinforming the media about his alleged innocence. Officer Cruz Sr. proudly spoke about his son's eagerness to make a difference against the violence happening in Garden Heights as if nothing happened. He continues to speak about Khalil as if he was a criminal while successfully tarnishing his name. In the end, the cycle of hatred will always continue because it comes from a point of bias, political influence, racism, and stereotyping. It can only be stopped if communities are ready to talk against them and step up.
Well, Hamda, it looks like you picked the theme of police brutality. What makes a good cop, and why is 115 a character in the book not a good example of what an officer should be?
Well, to make a good officer, a person needs to be fair and equal to everyone. They need to show a clear understanding of what is wrong and what is right. Officer 115 is not a good example of a cop because he made his decision of pulling the gun's trigger off of pure racial motivation. There are a few quotes that are used to show this. Angie Thomas wrote on page 24, as Star explains it, "Officer 115 yells at me, pointing the same gun he killed my friend with. In this scene, after shooting Khalil, the officer had automatically thought that Star was also a threat and pointed his gun at her. This is wrong because he didn't even check if Khalil had a weapon on him to justify if there was a reason for him shooting him. This shows that he's not a good cop because even though Star was screaming for Khalil, he didn't check Khalil for anything and just kept his gun pointed at her." There was one more where Officer 115 says to Khalil on page 23, I believe, he pats Khalil down. "Okay, smart mouth, let's see what we find on you today." So, while Officer 115 was also checking Khalil for any weapons or drugs, he still assumed that Khalil had something on him. This is not only offensive of Officer Cruz to say, but also wrong. This isn't something a good cop would do because he didn't find any drugs and wasn't finding any weapons either, and he still accused Khalil for having something on him just because of his race. So, in the end, this shows that Officer 115 sees Khalil as a threat because of his skin color that proves not a good example of a cop because he is racist and judgmental. And Anamika, education is a relevant theme in The Hate U Give. How does education help not only an individual, but a society? How can it be used as a tool to fight oppression?
You see, education can be an asset to help society fight against oppression by breaking the cycle of poverty through adequate employment opportunities to secure one's life, assisting communities on how to act when a bias arises, and helping individuals to pursue their dreams and achieve respect and acceptance from the society. In the book, Hate U Give, Star learns about the idea of thug life from her father, Maverick, caused by the hatred the government throws at the poor black people in neighborhoods like Garden Heights. I remember from page 169, Maverick says, "Then, even if you do have a high school diploma, so many of the schools in our neighborhoods don't prepare us well enough. That's why when your mama talked about sending you and your brothers to Williamson, I agreed. Our schools don't get the resources to equip you as Williamson does. It's easier to find some crack than it is to find a good school around here." This quote emphasizes the unfair education system and the lack of opportunities provided for the schools in Star's neighborhood, causing many youths like Kahil to sell drugs and indulge in illegal activities to provide for their families. Likewise, the author Angie Thomas relates Tupac's poem The Roses That Grew from Concrete with the roses in Maverick's garden. On page 435, when Star questions her dad about the weak roses in his garden, Maverick claims, "Yeah, a little damaged, but alive. I'm gonna try something different with them. Putting them in new soil can be like hitting a reset button." This quote symbolizes the reality of poor communities like Garden Heights lacking resources such as education and promoting a positive change by educating them for their well-being to survive and achieve their goals. Therefore, education is important in society to conquer oppression by letting everyone deserve equal opportunities and live in harmony with each other, knowing how to behave according to the morals they learn from many experienced teachers and diverse peers in an educational setting. Drishya, this last question is for you. What might be the key to a successful community?
I think this question does really sum up the topic and the themes we were talking about because it's talking about community. So the question, what might be the key to a successful community? Well, the key to having a successful community is knowing that it is built on trust, support, and respect. You know, these 3 points are the main idea on having a successful community. Knowing that they trust in whatever decision you're making, knowing that they support you in the decision you're making, and respecting whatever decision you're making also. I think in the book around 420 or page 422, when Star's dad's shop was lit on fire by the King Lords, people who had witnessed it came by, started helping them by extinguishing the fire with buckets of water. And they also supported them in renovating the store later on in the story. That shows support. Number one thing for a successful community. And then later on, I think, not later on, before that, when Star wanted to, give out her voice with what had happened that night with the grand jury and being interviewed, her mother, who was against that idea of doing something like that, being interviewed and going to the grand jury, she respected her daughter's decision and had accepted it and went along with it. So at the end of the story, when they came together, they trusted each other and they went out and had a protest outside the grand jury about the decision they made about 115. And yeah, that's it. So knowing that the community is built on trust, support, and respect is the key to having a successful community.
Alright guys, that's a wrap of today's discussion. I hope you liked it.
Be sure to read The Hate You Give, you won't regret it.
We'll be back with more content that needs to be addressed in today's society. Check out Tupac's poem, The Rose That Grew From Concrete. Wishing everyone a great day.
Bye. That's where I'm gonna stay.